Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and today I've got a special guest. I've got Steve Brown from Trixter. How's it going, Steve?
Peter, going great, man. And hello to everybody out there in the Australian rock world.
Absolutely. Look, is it surreal to you that you're going to be in 2026 traveling to Australia and spreading the word of the gospel of Trixter?
It definitely is. I mean, this is a bucket list moment for me. PJ's been there before. He's been over there with Fozzy a couple years ago. And he told me how beautiful it is. But since I was a little kid, since 1980, when I saw Kiss was going over there for the first time, it's always been a dream of mine to go to Australia. And finally, it looks like it's going to come true. And I cannot wait to rock and roll for all you Australians, and more importantly, meet everybody and and see the beautiful cities of Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Again, I hope you all know how much this means to me, and most importantly, I am going to give you guys everything I got to put on the best possible rock show.
Fantastic. Look, what can we expect in the show? Is this going to be a career-spanning set list?
For sure. Look, we're coming over for the first time, so we're going to give you the best representation of what Trixter is right now. And, let's be real, it's a different band than it was 36 years ago. We don't have our original singer and drummer anymore. We are a trio now, which is kind of funny. Like Rush, King's X, and ZZ Top. Trixter is a power trio. So, that throws a different element into it. But, look, I don't think anybody's going to miss anything. As we get older, and I'm sure you know this, Peter, people's lives change and bands change. And, there are very few bands out there that have all original members anymore. And so PJ and I are still the duo together that are waving the Trixter flag for everybody. And but yeah, the set list has something from every record, and I think everybody's going to be more than satisfied with for the first time seeing Trixter. And all I can say is we're just going to do the best we can and give everybody the best rock show we can, as is Lorraine Lewis, Femme Fatale, and Stevie Rochelle from Tough.
When you evolved into a three-piece, did you find things had to get much tighter in a live setting?
Well, I mean, look, it's I never wanted to be the lead singer, if that's what you mean. I always, for Trixter, it was always modeled after Van Halen, and Bon Jovi and Def Leppard in a way, but, more as a four-piece thing. And so for me, all I wanted to be was Eddie Van Halen, sing background vocals. Eddie Van Halen, Richie Sambora doing the high harmonies. But that's not the case now. So when I took over, it was kind of a natural evolution because, Peter, we started doing this Trixter acoustic thing, which was kind of dipping our feet into seeing if people were going to accept this as a trio and see how my voice was together and PJ as lead singers. PJ sings two or three of the songs in the set. I'm the primary lead singer. My voice is much higher, and I can do all the songs because back in the day, man, and I don't know if a lot of fans know this, but I sang all the songs before anybody because I wrote them. And yes. I would give Pete a demo tape of the songs and say, here. And it was my voice. I think the Give It To Me Good original demo is somewhere on YouTube. And so you can hear me, and it pretty much is the same song as what you hear on the record. I also, on the first album, that's me singing the first verse and chorus of On and On. And so I've been a lead singer in Trixter since the beginning. It's just now I don't have Pete next to me, and we would switch off vocals. So, again, man, all I can say is this is where we are now, and I think you can look at some of the footage. Anybody can go on YouTube and see, and a lot of fans have gone, man, you sound better than ever. And I agree. The only thing that's different is I don't jump around as much anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, you started the band right back in the day, actually, when you were a teenager.
Yeah.
You
Not
know,
even. I was 12 years old.
12 years old. So
Yeah.
you've been there right from the start. But looking back, do you think the band's chemistry with the Four, and I'm talking about the Four with the debut, was that a slow burn chemistry, or pretty well straight from the bat when the four of you got together? It sort of, there was alchemy.
It was, I mean, from the beginning, I had a very clear vision of what the band was going to be. Look, I come from a great family. My father was he was a teacher and a principal and a coach, and he taught me very early on the importance of being a leader and being a hard worker and he always used to say to me, do your best to be your best. Be prepared. Preparation breeds confidence. Confidence breeds excellence. And that's the way I lived my life. So by the time I was 12 years old, I'd already been playing guitar for 4.5 years. And I was pretty good. I was writing songs, and I knew what this band was going to be. And it was going to be a combination of, Van Halen, Def Leppard, because Def Leppard, that was the direct influence for me starting Trixter, was reading an article in Circus Magazine here in the States that Rick Allen, he joined the band when he was 15. And that was a big light bulb moment for me. When I read that, I went, that's it. I'm going to start the youngest heavy metal hard rock band there is, and we're going to be faster, we're going to jump around more, we're going to wear brighter clothes, we're going to have better hair. And that's what the influence for Trixter really was. But it was very clear what it was going to be. And Pete at the time was not a singer. I taught him how to sing, and and basically directed the whole thing. Put the whole show together in the early days. There's some footage that's on YouTube and you can see, but that was what it was. But of course, over the years, and the fact that we pretty much, the original band, and PJ came in 1988. So the original band was my neighbor up the street, Doug Cowie was the bass player, and this kid around the block, this guy Mike Payne, who was the three of us, that was the first time I ever played with a real drummer and a bass player and heard that sound of a live rock band and hearing that volume for the first time and the power. And it was a shot to my arm, addiction, like I want this all of the time. And here we are, 42 years later from the first Trixter show, still doing it. And I still get that same rush every time I play live rock and roll.
You guys got a bit of an East Coast following in the 80s leading up to the debut. And you were playing with bands like Skid Row and Kix. Was there a lot of camaraderie amongst these bands, or was it ultra competitive, sink or swim?
No, it was very, very different. I mean, the Skid Row guys they were our big brothers, as were the Bon Jovi guys. It all started, the whole thing, what happened was, it was the Slippery When Wet effect. John Bon Jovi and Richie and Dave, Tico and Alec, the original Bon Jovi. We made our first demo tape in 1986, and a couple months later, we had a press kit, and it was the summer of 86, right before Slippery When Wet came out, and we gave John our demo tape, and he called us on our hotline, and he said, man, I think you guys are great, keep up the good work, I'm going to be looking out, send me tapes, and that's what we did, and that was an incredible sort of seal of approval from a legitimate rock star. Yet, Slippery When Wet hadn't been released and it didn't take off. A couple months later, Slippery When Wet came out, and John was the biggest rock star in the world. And we saw him again New Year's Eve at the Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey, Bon Jovi and Cinderella, and we were backstage. We snuck backstage, as we used to do all the time. And we saw John after the show, and he came right up to us, Trixter, come here. And he goes, man, I want to introduce you to some guys that I'm working with. And it was Snake and Rachel and Scotty and Rob Affuso, the Skid Row. And we had booked a show with them in Staten Island, New York, a couple months later. And John said to Snake, hey man, make sure you take care of Steve and the guys, make sure they get a sound check. And that was the beginning of it, man. And those guys became brothers, and John and Richie always looked out for us. And yeah, it was very different than when going to LA and knowing the stories about how cutthroat it was in Dog Eat Dog, where, in LA, the bands would, sabotage each other's shows. If you put a flyer up, they would rip it down and it wasn't like that. It was very much, that thing, the Bon Jovi thing, the Jersey Syndicate was very much true. And, proud to say that after all these years, we're all still buds. Back in the day, one of the coolest things was after we hit it big, the day we found out that the first Trixter record went gold. We were in California playing, we were on tour with the Scorpions, and John was in our dressing room, and I just got word from our manager, and I was able to tell John, and I said, dude, we just got word from the record company, our record just crossed 500,000 units, and he goes, I always knew you guys were going to make it. And it was, it's great. And here we all are, Skid Row's looking for another singer, but they're still our brothers. We love them to death. And, can't wait for what's next.
Have you got a position on that? Do you think it's about, get Sebastian back into the band? Because, you don't think so?
No, Sebastian is going to be with Twisted Sister in a couple months.
I know, but in the future,
and as is my drummer in my Bon Jovi tribute band, Always Jovi. Joey Casada is the new drummer in Twisted Sister. So it's it's an interesting thing, but all I do is wish the best for everybody.
Do you think Sebastian will get back one day? Gut feel? Do you think one day? I don't
know, but I do know that the Skid Row guys, I'm very good friends with their manager, and I know the inside. I know that they're very close. I think they have somebody that they have their eye on, a New York guy who's phenomenal. And I think maybe that might be the thing, but I could be wrong. They're, Snake and Rachel are like my older brothers, and I want them to succeed, and I want them to be out on the road. And as I'm happy as well, I'm happy that Sebastian is going to be filling in for Twisted Sister, because those guys are friends of mine. Eddie Ojeda is a dear friend for the last 20 years, and, they were so looking forward to getting out and doing these shows, and when Dee decided to bail, it was a tough one, and I was the first one going, man, they just get a fill and get somebody to sing. And sure enough, Sebastian was the guy waiting in the wings.
Absolutely. So when you were supporting these bands, what were the lessons, both good and bad, you learned?
Well, I think first and foremost is how to treat people and being nice to people. The Scorpions, legendary band, and, those guys were, old enough to be our dads. So they still had the rock and roll vibe, partying and having fun, but also, most importantly, whatever you do when you're not performing, always be in the mindset that you're going to put on the best show. So they were always great like that. Every night they were unbelievable on the Crazy World Tour. They are still, to this day, one of the greatest live rock and roll bands ever. And they were so great to us. I remember the first night of that tour, Rudy Schenker going, "Oh, Trixter, great to meet you. Yes, we brought you out because you remind us of a young Bon Jovi. And we know that because you're out on tour with us and you're doing so great, there's going to be a lot of beautiful girls in the audience."
Ulterior motives, eh?
Motives. But again, that was it. And we learned from everything, Poison, Bret Michaels and the Poison guys, that was our first arena tour that we ever did. And those guys, Bret especially, took us under their wing. Every night after the show, we'd have dinner with them. We'd be sitting in their dressing room having this great food and drinking beers. And it was awesome. And Bret, still to this day, is, again, we're still friends with all these guys, Absolutely. And it means so much. But what I learned from everybody is the importance of putting on a great show every night, because the fans who come to see a show, especially arena shows where they want to get away from their 9-to-5 lives and escape, it is our job to put on the best rock and roll show that we can and make everybody have the best night of their lives.
Yeah. Were there lessons to learn in respect of avoiding, like I guess you would have been exposed to the excesses as well.
Alcohol and cocaine. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
when we were out with Poison, it's no secret that CC and Bobby Dahl were, heavily partaking in all of those bad things. The coke and the booze and the rock and whatever else. And yeah, I saw a little bit of that, and it was kind of scary at times because at that point, we were still, we like to drink a little bit, but the bad stuff hadn't really infiltrated our band. And we were never really that kind of band anyway. We were the type who would love to get up in the morning and run around the arena. We would throw footballs, and we were just so happy. We're like, holy shit, we're playing arenas every night.
Yeah.
This is it. It's all we ever wanted to do, man. We never even gave a shit about making a record. All we ever wanted to do was play. When we were kids, all we said to each other was, all we want to do is play the Meadowlands Arena, because that was the big arena where we saw all the shows. We saw Van Halen and David Lee Roth and Bon Jovi and Def Leppard and Kiss. Everybody there. Judas Priest, Rat, every band, Billy Squier. It was the best. That's all we ever wanted to do. And we're like, oh shit, well, the only way you get to play arenas is you got to make a record and have hit songs. We learned that after the fact.
Absolutely. So you were picked up by MCA in 1989. Were there a lot of record companies circling around?
Yeah, there were. We were blessed that we had a guy, his name is Peter Mensch, who was, Def Leppard and Metallica's manager, who took us under his wing. And though he wasn't managing us, he was guiding our managers at the time, who were young bucks in the business. And Peter took a liking to us. And he brought our tape to every record company and said, this band, Trixter, is going to be opening for Def Leppard on their next tour. And that, of course, opened up all the doors. And, all the record companies, Polygram, Geffen, Atlantic, they all came out to my mom and dad's house where I lived and where we rehearsed. And we would do showcases for them in the basement. And my mother would make them iced tea and sandwiches and ShopRite pretzels. And, we had the biggest people in the music business coming to Paramus, New Jersey. My neighbors would be looking out the window. They'd see these limousines pulling up every day. And that's what it was. But in the end, there was this guy, Steve Sinclair at Mechanic MCA Records, and his team that they had a vision for us that was different than everybody else, and they got it. And that's where we went. And, next thing we released a record, and couple months after we released the record, we did the first video for Give It To Me Good, and the rest is history.
Absolutely. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, Steve. Do you regret that maybe you didn't go with a Geffen or a Warner that may have been more favorable to metal and hard rock and knew how to push it? Or you're comfortable how things
I'm
rolled?
Comfortable because, and here's the honest story behind that. Geffen Records was so close to signing us. We had the president's son. But they didn't think we were ready. And so they offered us a development deal, and, they were like, we want to do this and that. And we were, and our managers and everybody, even Peter Mensch, all these guys, like, no, man, get him in the studio with a producer. And, like with Def Leppard, get a producer, Mutt Lang, who can help shape the songs and shape the sound. And we got to go on this. The momentum is there. It was already 1989, and, we didn't really know that the end was becoming soon. But, at the end of the day, they didn't say the right things to us. And Mechanic MCA and that team, they were all about it, and they had a unique way of doing it. And I don't think, look, if we hadn't done that, I don't think the success would have been there, because Mechanic they did alternative marketing that really worked for us.
Yeah, because it was pretty close to the grunge and alternative coming in, and Geffen turning on a lot of hard rock acts. But I want to go back. When they say not ready, do they mean the songs are not polished enough, the performances? Was it the whole package? Did they define what they meant by not ready? Because I find that quite strange.
Look,
Yeah.
man, A&R people at the record label are spineless, most of them, and they don't know shit. They're
Yeah.
all worried about their bonuses. Back in the day, it was all, look, in the 80s, like any genre that's successful, for every famous band, there's 20 copycats. And there were 10 Poisons, there were 10 Bon Jovis, there were 10 offshoots, and it was whoever got the deal. But with Trixter, we were unique because we were the youngest out of all of them, and that's a fact. And we also had a different image. We were not the band that was wearing the Ray Brown, whoever made all the clothes, Floor DeMeyer, like everybody else. As much as I love the Warrants and the Wingers and, whoever else, they all wore the same clothes and I love those bands. But we were the band that brought flannel shirts to rock and roll. We were wearing jeans and Converse All-Stars and ripped up rock and roll shirts. And a lot of the bigger labels, they just wanted to get you in and dump you through the system, put you through the Desmond Child, Mutt Lange, sausage maker. But that wasn't us. And that was very apparent when our first single and video came out, Give It To Me Good, where the sound was different. It wasn't as polished. And I didn't want that. I wanted us to be more polished. I wanted us to sound like a cross between Van Halen and Def Leppard. But Give It To Me Good was so unique, and the look of the band. We were in the basement, in the garage, and it showed what we were. And immediately people saw that Trixter was a different thing altogether. And many people, and including Rolling Stone magazine, said in one of their articles that Trixter was the band that bridged the gap between hair metal, 80s hard rock, and grunge. And damn well a lot of the bands took our look and ran with it, the grunge bands.
I was about to say that. Everyone's pointing to Seattle, but maybe it's Trixter. With that particular look. Absolutely.
Yep. And we became friends with a lot of those bands afterwards. We were tight with the Alice in Chains guys and the STP guys. So
look, with the debut, you relocated to Hollywood to record the debut album. Was that a surreal experience to, gone from the East Coast, now you're in Hollywood?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, man. What was that like?
It was all that, we were, look, we were all kids that lived with our parents and lived in suburban New Jersey. And then we went out to LA and lived in the corporate housing like all the bands did. I remember some of the guys from Europe were in our building and other bands. What was the other band? Who's the band from England? Spike. It was the one guy. They're like the Faces. They were in our building, but it was rock and roll central, man. Right off Sunset Strip. We lived on Fuller Avenue and Sunset Strip down by Guitar Center, and it was amazing, And what was really cool is we had 2 weeks. We got out there, set up. Truck drove our gear out, drove some of our dirt bikes out there, and we just had 2 weeks to go nuts. And we went to a couple industry functions, but one of the coolest nights ever before we started recording the record was we went to this club and we're sitting there and we look and there David Lee Roth walks in. And dude, for us at that point, we had never met the Van Halen guys. I'd become dear friends with Ed Van Halen and Alex. I still talk to Alex once a week. But at that point, we were friends with the Bon Jovi guys, Skid Row, Def Leppard, of course.
Yeah.
But David Lee Roth, that was one of our gods. Like, that was like, oh my God, there he is. And we had just come out. So I got up. And when I walked right up to him, I said, "Hey, Dave, I'm Steve Brown from band Trixter, and I just want you to know we signed a record deal with MCA Records. We're out here making our debut album, and it's all because of you guys, because of you, Ed, Al, Mike. Van Halen was our biggest influence." And he had a drink in his hand and a cigarette. He was in the black leather. He was riding his Harley, and he goes, congratulations, Steve, and make a great record and have fun, But it was to David Lee Roth, and it was great. And I remember going, hey, man, can I buy you a drink? And, dude, I was only 19 at the time. I couldn't even buy a drink, but I said it, and he goes, no, I'm good. He had like a vodka or something on the rocks, but it was just mind-blowing. And then we went into making the record, and that was, 3 months living in L.A., and it got lonely, man. L.A. is one of those places where people think it's exciting and parties every night, but I'll tell you, and still to this day, if you're there for a long period of time, it could be one of the loneliest places on earth, and it's a very, what do you say? It doesn't have a lot of heart and soul. It's a very,
bit cold and clinical.
Yeah. And but luckily we had each other, and we were making a record, and we were having the best time, even though it was very, it was difficult, man. Recording a record for the first time, being so young and not having all that studio experience. It was a lot, but at the end of the day, we made a classic rock and roll record that stood the test of time. And again, here we are 36 years later, about to come to Australia for the first time, playing a lot of those songs.
Absolutely. Was it a long recording process, or was it quite speedy? Was there a long time to lay the tracks down?
It took longer than I think bands that were more experienced. I mean, it was a 5-month on and off process of making the record, because we did 2.5 months in LA. We were at Sound City, the famous Sound City, which was a dream come true, recording there. We recorded in that main room, the Fleetwood Mac, where they did Rumors, and, Rick Springfield and Dio, and it was just incredible. And then we went over to another studio called Track Record, where Kiss did Hot in the Shade, and various other places. But then we moved to New York. We came back home. Pete and I got homesick. So I was like, man, I want to go home. I want to do the vocals in New York. So we worked at Battery Studios in New York, which was, where Def Leppard did some of their stuff. And, Zomba Publishing was that. And, but yeah, I mean, it took time, and, but at the end of the day, we made it, and thank God we released it when we did. We got Absolutely. In. We were one of the last bands.
You got in the slipstream, right in the right time. Hey, Bobby Kimball from Toto, how did you secure him as backup vocal? I'm interested in that one. 1 in a million.
Yep, that's for sure. Well, that was an interesting story, because when we were making the record, LA is one of those things where there's musicians everywhere, and different guys, session musicians. And what had happened was, we had this opportunity. My producer came to me and said, hey man, Tim Pierce is here, and he wants to talk to you. If you need any gear or whatever, he'll rent you all of his stuff. Now, Tim Pierce, for all the people who don't know, one of my favorite guitar players from the 80s, still to this day. He was Rick Springfield's guitar player, and he was also the guitar player who played guitar on Bon Jovi Runaway. That's his guitar solo. And I was such a fan, because he always played the best stuff. So I met him, and he said, hey man, if you want to rent some gear from me. And I go, yes, I want it all. He's like, I have a Soldano SLO 100, which was the amp that Ed Van Halen was using at the time. That was the new rage. And I was like, and there weren't many of them around. I said, I want that amp. So I wound up renting like most of Tim Pierce's gear, and used a lot of it. He had all these great guitars that I used for overdubs. And so long and short, we befriended another guy, this guy, Billy Trudell, who was in a couple bands. He became Elton John's background singer, but he was in the circle, and he was friends with Bobby Kimball and David Glenn Isley from Jafria. And he was like, hey, man, if you need background vocalists, these guys, Bobby at the time was looking for work. I think he was down on his luck. And we were like, Bobby Kimball from Toto and David Glenn Isley, like, bring him in, man. We'll pay them. We had a big budget to make, not a big budget, but, and we brought them in, and it was like, man, that's them on, Line of Fire. You can hear on the Me. It was me, Bobby, David, and we would do the gang vocals together. And those guys were really I learned so much from how to make those big background vocal stacks from them. And another guy, a Jersey guy that I co-wrote some of the Trixter stuff with, Jack Ponte, who recently passed away. God bless Jack Ponte. He co-wrote a couple Bon Jovi songs and worked with Alice Cooper. But, working Bobby Kimball was unbelievable. And you can hear on the end of 1 in a Million those vocal licks that Pete's doing. And Pete posted a video about this.
I saw it.
Yeah, Bobby sang those, and Pete tried to copy it as best he could. But man,
he did a good job. He did an honorable job. Yeah.
And Bobby was one of the funniest guys. I mean, we had to tell him to shut up because we couldn't get any work done because he'd just be cracking jokes the whole time.
Yeah, we've got a budget here, Bobby.
Yeah. Well, that was
time is money.
Yeah, exactly. But man, again, and we had, Dave and Bob and Billy Trudell. They also sang. They also helped me on here as well. So we brought in the team to do that. But working with Bill Ray and Jim Ray on that record and all the different people, Brian Jenkins who engineered it, it was just incredible. Brian Farker who mixed it. And then, we were lucky enough to have Mike Shipley from Def Leppard and Shania Twain. He remixed 1 in a Million for the single. And that's more what I wanted the record to sound like. And so,
But the production doesn't sound dated. That's the thing, because a lot of those bands in that era were using gated drums and a lot of stuff that was very hooked in with what was trendy. And it just alludes to what you were saying earlier, that a lot of the sounds that we're using on that album are kind of more classic rock, aren't they?
I agree that I see that more and more as time goes on. Look, when you're the songwriter and the chief of the band and the visionary, and this is what I'm never satisfied, dude. Anything I do, nowadays I've gotten to a point where I accept things more, but every record I've ever done, and still to this day, I listen and I hear things, oh man, I should have done that better, or we should have done this. But that's me, as I want to always be better. And hence where we're 75% done with a new Trixter record right now. That
fantastic. I was going to ask you about that.
I'm so happy with. It's been. Yeah, and don't hold your breath, because sadly there are not enough hours in the day. And, I'm blessed that I get asked and hired to do other people's records. I just did 5 songs for the new Angel record, producing vocals with Frank and Punky and Danny. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Is that? Can you give us a little bit of a teaser? Is it sounding like the classic Angel of the 70s? Or?
Yes. I mean, it sounds like everything Angel was, but something new. And and again, that's what I tried to do working with Ace on 10,000 volts, was to take all the classic elements, but make something new and also give it a modern style production, that makes it more enjoyable for the listener. And Angel is doing the same thing, on Cleopatra Records, working with Lorraine Lewis on her new record, Femme Fatale. We're more than halfway done with that, and it's coming out incredible. Which you've heard.
You're a busy guy, aren't you?
Yeah.
A lot of things happening. Hey, do guitar riffs come easy to you?
Yes. Yes.
Do you wake up in the middle of the night and you've got a riff and you've got to put it on tape?
Not so much anymore. Look, man, this is my studio, so I'm here. I'm blessed in the sense I get to start my coffee in the morning when I get up, and I get up very early. And I bring my coffee down, and whether I'm working on somebody else's record or my own, I have all these guitars, and I pick something up and start, and
Are riffs in your head? Are you got music in your head all the time?
All the time.
Just notes?
My mind is always lyrics, melodies, singing, and again, this is something that I love to do. I have to be down here and be creative. As much as I love touring and playing live, I love being in the studio just as much. And it's become so easy for me that it's so natural. This is the mic I use, and we use this on 10,000 volts. Ace would sing standing right behind me right here, and I'd be editing and working on stuff and going, Ace, sing this, try this. And, you know, but that's the beauty of it nowadays, you know. But I've had, you know, I've had this home studio for 30 years. You know, it was very much a dream of mine when I was able, with the success of Trixter, to be able to buy this house. And my goal was to have, and I've told this story before, you know, that to have my own version of 5150. And that's why I named it 6160 Mojo Vegas 6160. And when I was building the studio, I saw Ed Van Halen. I went up to a Van Halen show, and I remember telling him, I go, yeah, man, I'm building a studio like you and Al have. You have 5150. And I said to him, I go, my studio's name is 6160. And he had a cigarette, and he goes, what does 6160 mean? I go, I don't know what it means, but it sounds really cool. And he just started cracking up.
What was Eddie Van Halen like? In a couple of words, describe him.
Just the nicest, coolest, you know, greatest rock and roll guitar player, coolest guy that you could ever imagine. You know, I mean, he was like, I tell people all the time, like, he was just a regular guy, and Alex is the same way. There's no rock star, you know, and I've had these conversations. Those guys were musicians, and you know the story about them, when they lived and breathed music, to where their lives outside of music, they didn't have many friends. They would constantly be making music, and that was their whole thing, you know. And I talked to Ed about it when I was tight with him, and I've talked about it with Alex, you know, and they both told me if they hadn't made it big, they still would be playing music, because that's what their father did. You know, they came from that mentality. And that's the same way PJ and I are. You know, as soon as the rug got pulled from us with the success of Trixter, we didn't go get day jobs. We didn't go become used car dealers. You know, we started cover bands to make money playing music, because we're musicians. That's what we do. And whether it's playing stadiums or playing a nightclub, that's what we do. We're musicians. I'll tell you one thing, you know, Peter, when I did the last run with Def Leppard in 2018, I played a couple stadiums and arenas. We were out with Def Leppard and Journey, and I did 3 shows filling in for Phil Collin, and it was that. But 5 days after I got off the plane, I was back playing at the Jersey Shore, playing a bar for 20 people on a Monday night. You know why? Because I'm a musician, and that's what I do, you know? And so,
what was that like, filling in for them? Was that sort of like flying by the seat of your pants to learn the set list in, you know, like that?
Well, I mean, you know, at that point, you know, I mean, it's no secret. I was Def Leppard's backup guitar player for the last 10, 15 years now, and waiting in the wings, and always, you know, I was always on retainer during tours and, you know, being ready. But when I got the call to fill in for Phil Collin, because, you know, I had been Vivian Campbell's fill-in, and so when this family emergency came up, I had to completely go, oh, I got to learn. I knew all the songs already, backwards and forwards. So that was a good thing, and I just had to go, all right, I got to change this guitar part, you know, the beginning of Bringing on the Heartbreak. Instead of doing the lower harmony, I had to play the higher harmony. So, and that was a 24-hour you know, learning process for me to be able to do that. But luckily, I knew their stuff so well, and I guess maybe because I'm such a good musician and know how to prepare, I basically worked for 20, I think I slept maybe 4 hours in that 24 hours, and I worked and just went over everything and got it, and kept going over and over up until I went on stage in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I was in the dressing room playing through the songs, and I remember Joe grabbing me, "Hey, Steve, come on, it's time to go on stage now." And literally from the tuning room right to the stage that first night, and you could see the video, you know, I basically played a flawless show. And that's what I do, you know, for my friends. And I did the same thing with Dennis DeYoung. I filled in for both of his guitar players in various times over,
absolutely. Yeah.
2015 and 2019. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So you had to deliberately just be less Steve Brown and be a bit more the Def Leppard sound in that 24-hour period.
Oh yeah, the Def Leppard sound and the Def Leppard performance. I knew I wasn't going
Mm,
to be doing Eddie Van Halen's scissor kicks on the Def Leppard thing. That's much more of a, as they say, you got to throw the shapes. And their tour manager at the time, this
mm.
guy Jimmy Ayers, who's a legend, he was Aerosmith and Whitesnake's tour manager. He goes, Steve, you throw great shapes, and that's the rock star poses with the guitar, and and that's what it's all about. But
Yeah, and
anytime I play with different bands, you have to look at what they do on stage and be part of that show. Again, playing with Dennis DeYoung did not lend itself to me doing, scissor kicks off the drum riser trying to be Eddie Van Halen. As
so
much as I wanted to.
that's sort of, you got to just mind control.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't do it. Can't do it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Here came out in 1992. That was a change in direction, and every subsequent album from Trixter has been a change in musical direction. And dare I say, I can hear a bit of roots. I can hear a bit of R&B. I can hear blues. Is this what the new Trixter album, when it comes out, is that the sound? Is there going to be some new sounds that are going to come out in this album when it comes out?
I mean, I like to think that, but more importantly, it is going to be a representation of everything, what Trixter is, what we started when I started the band. It was all about being a combination of Kiss, Van Halen, Cheap Trick, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Rat, all the great bands from that era, Motley Crue that we loved, all rolled up into one. And still to this day, that's what it is. We make great melodic hard rock music. Guitar solos, all the cool stuff that we all love. I think that it's going to have all that, but the different element, of course, is that I'm going to be I'm the primary lead singer. PJ's going to sing a couple songs, and I'd like to think that it's going to be our best record that we've ever made, because I think the songs, my songwriting every year, just to me, it seems to be getting better and better. And I think I'm hoping at least the fans are going to take it like that. But all I do, Peter and PJ and our new drummer Ben, all we ever try to do is just be the best we can be, and that's all. That's all I can tell you, is that we're always. I don't give 100%. I give 1,000% in everything I do.
Absolutely. So, what are the plans in the next 12 months? More of a world tour, other territories to cover? What do you foresee in the next 12 months?
Well, we have, we're booking hard for, this year. And yes, I mean, at this point in my life, and PJ, we're trying to check off all the lists, the bucket list. PJ's done a lot more international touring than I have. I still have yet to have gone to Scandinavia and played any of the big festivals, Sweden Rock, that's a dream for me to be, I'm also, 25% Dutch. So to go to, Holland and Sweden and all those places, Denmark, I still, I'm hoping that that's all going to happen for us, and I believe it will. So we're looking forward to that, and and just doing our thing here. In the meantime, I also have a new Bon Jovi tribute called Always Jovi that's getting a lot of bookings for this year, and that's something that's been a passion project of mine. And luckily I've been blessed with being able to mimic John's voice back in the heyday, and we have a phenomenal band, and the response to that's been overwhelming. So I'm looking forward to a really busy couple years, and at the end of the day, Peter, I love what I do, and I think that shows. And I challenge myself. PJ does the same, and we play in different things. PJ is also a member of Chris Jericho's band Fozzy, so that enables us to do different projects with other people. But PJ and I always come home, and Trixter is the home base.
Yeah, well, as the Stones said, it's only rock and roll, but you like it. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, Steve. So
Likewise,
check
brother.
them out. Trixter playing Sydney. I'll put the dates on the link below this clip. It's been a pleasure talking to you, mate. And yeah, I'd love to talk to you sometime in the future.
Yeah, man. I hope. Are you coming out to any of the shows?
I am indeed. I think next Thursday.
All right. Well, I can't wait to meet you and everybody in Australia. We'll see you soon. And just know how excited I am to finally get over there to meet all of you and rock and roll for you. It's gonna be a 1 in a million show, and we are gonna give it to you good. Stevie Rochelle from Tough is gonna be with us, and Lorraine Lewis, and it's gonna be just so much fun and a great rock and roll show.
Absolutely. Pleasure talking to you. Rock
Thanks,
Daydream
brother.
Nation. All the best. Cheers.
See you next week. Thanks, man.
Okay, see
Bye.
ya.